My gosh, it's all day live. Or let's say, I think alive is a lot of things to think about, especially if you're alive to be able to do that. But we are here today to hear and have the great opportunity to hear someone I have a lot of respect for, including Will Banjera back there. I have respect for you. It was Will's idea that we interview DaveMyrland. Who's DaveMyrland? And that's Dave. Dave, we're going to hear from you in just a second, and I'm going to get your name up there. But Dave is, in a sense, he's kind of a guiding inspiration for us here in the Northwest, in legal inspiration, that is, laws. He's one of the people that takes the time to really study it, to really teach it, to really see what it is he knows actually works. Not some kind of thing where you see this organizational operation called the bar, which apparently they can actually refuse you legal help, by the way. That's interesting. And I have been denied legal help, especially if they stole a very large estate that I had created after I founded 7 NASDAQ companies 18 years ago. I find out, it's a big find out. Anyway, Dave, I don't really want to waste their time. I want you to fill their time up with great wisdom. I'm greatly honored that you're here. And Will Banjera, Will, you had a question first we start off with?
Well, no, I'd like to make a statement. I mean, I'm delighted to be here with Mr. Merland. I've studied a lot of your work, and I'm just amazed by it. And there was some of your work that I used myself on a Seattle Municipal Court case 516-517, dealing with the legal definition of motor vehicle. And I put the truth in under Chapter 59, Subtitle 6 on the Title 49 Federal as well. And the City of Seattle, the prosecuting attorney filed with the Seattle Municipal Court a motion for dismissal for proof problems, which is exactly what I learned from you. And I've studied your work for a long time. I think that today's show is going to be mostly focusing on federal taxation. And I've studied your Section 83 under there that they cannot touch. And I've done a lot of studies on your work, Mr. Merland, and I'm very excited that you're here, and I'm very excited to be a co-host here with you as well. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate it a lot. Your time, our respect for you, David, is considered highly regarded. So we're greatly honored, and that means this is a valuable moment for all of us. And I'm hoping that the viewers that do see this program about a week or two from now can value that as much as we do right at this moment and later on, because I'll be watching the show with you and everybody else when it does come on, just because we can. I have sat through a lot of lectures, Dave. You've taught, you've educated, you've inspired, and now you've got wevgov.com, that's a website, and based on tax and analysis and things like that, pulling people out of the IRS rut, more or less the trap that they set up for people. They're basically unknowing, and they get pulled into a trap they don't know anything about by a crime organization calling itself a tax organization, right?
Yes.
And there's nothing legal about them. I read the letter by Ralph Monroe, who used to be the Secretary of State, clearly saying that the IRS has absolutely no jurisdiction in the state whatsoever. It doesn't belong here, they can't operate here. Well, how is it we pay taxes? And that notice of lien is outright fraud because it's not signed by a judge, just to scare you.
Well, you know, Will, I'd like to add to that same philosophy that you speak there also is applied to our rights in general.
Yeah, for real. The IRS, as far as I can see, is a giant Satanist coven tied to organized crime, tied to the Vatican, tied to all the bad guys on planet Earth. I figure they're pirates from some part of the galaxy that come to little planets like this to harvest souls. That's the only thing I can think of. I can't explain it, how they get so much power, take over everything, steal everything, and get away with hardworking people becoming basically either killed or enslaved by them. It makes no sense, yet we do all the work, and we build all the countries, and they steal it all. And yet, we don't even teach that in school. That's the #1 thing that should be taught in school. Guaranteed, your country will be stolen.
Greedy control freaks.
Yeah. And then these people show up that are the IRS, but Dave, I don't want to tell them all that. You know a lot more than I do. I'm just trying to fill in to get my viewers ready to listen to what you've got to teach them, if that's good. Is that right? I mean,
Yeah.
you carry the ball. I don't really know anything other than I think the whole country has become victims. We've all become victims of a time in history. And it seems like that's all we have, is the historical track record of being targeted by people who did nothing but just target us and got away with it. You know.
Hey, Will.
Yeah.
You know, I would like to add to that also my studies in technical game analysis psychology.
Yep.
And what it talks about is that the work that Mr. Merlin has done, that we have all learned so much from, is the truth itself. And just because Mr. Merlin, just because you've done this, it changes everything. The truth, what these guys, you know, that are taking advantage of the country and just raping the country, what they're doing is, you know, people are waking up. And again, I say, I'm just delighted to be here, and your truths shine, and it changes everything.
Nice,
We can only hope.
Yeah. In things that I've learned from you in the past, one of the things that I couldn't believe it when I first heard, because it took me for a shock, it was proven that over half of our U.S. Congress are listed as pedophiles. I mean, seriously, I couldn't believe it. Over half our Congress. And you mentioned something that the judges are pedophiles. I mean, but you said that 12 years to me at a lecture you did, with the most serious look on your face, and I thought, that's kind of like the seal of this is real. We're dealing with this. I have no idea how these people have considered themselves evolved, since this guy, the 2 million-year-old bones that were found in Africa. These people don't seem to have evolved at all, period. And yet they have all the power that we have to work overtime just to figure out how to protect ourselves from them. I mean,
well, that's because they don't.
It's insane.
That's because they don't want to deal with the fact that they're wimps.
No, it's a matter that honest people work hard. They don't think that way. They do things productively, build countries, build cities, roads, businesses, and look out for future generations. These people aren't. You don't realize we're not all the same. Will, it's hard.
No,
for me to
I'm
believe
talking. I'm talking about the Congress itself.
Yes, what?
I'm talking about Congress itself.
Yeah.
They're morons and wimps, and how they
No, they're
wait a minute, how they fight against that.
They're prostitutes working for the Vatican and the Rothschild banking enterprises.
That's fine.
And the people that came from some part of the galaxy that didn't belong here, that are destroying this planet that we're on. Probably.
Well, but Will, don't you understand
Anyway.
the reason why they're attracted to the job, so they can hide behind it?
Okay. Anyway, enough of our not knowing anything. We're just sitting here proving. People, you already know we didn't. We'd have to say anything, and you still wouldn't know we didn't know anything. And Dave, as far as your inventions, I know there's things you got incredible breakthroughs, but we can't talk about that right now. Books that you've written, the website, which I've got in the background, which I'm going to scroll around as we get some ideas, and on tax analysis, I've said things that I mean, only what I've heard. That's all. Where would somebody start? Do they go to wevgov.com? Do they call you? What happens? I don't know.
They go to the website, wevgov.com.
Okay.
It starts and ends right there on the website.
Okay. And I got it here, and I've got the tax page, which is right here in the back. So that you mentioned something about that would be like the key one that you want to focus on,
Yes.
get people to know of. Okay, I don't really know anything, so I'm just one of the people in TV land kind of waiting to learn something about this, because they took me for millions of dollars in phony tax warrants years ago that I paid, not knowing anything, and when I could not find anybody to help me. They paid off over 40 accounting companies, followed me around after they stole millions of dollars from me, used my money to pay off the entire accounting community. I retained them. I still had money. I retained them. They would just sit on the retainer money and do nothing. I'm over 40 of them I went to, trying to get an audit of this group here in Seattle that are nothing but an organized crime agency tied to Bank of Nazi America. And you know, you find out all the judges are on the boards of these banks, and then when you go to file a case, you're simply filing a case that's resided by a judge that's a president of the bank that stole your money. That makes sense. But that's what happened with Judge Kuhnauer. I mean, I mean, all I can think of is I am one of the founders of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, many, many years ago. And all I can think of is there is life out there. I know it's intelligently more guided than we are and watching us. And I'm thinking, you know, maybe there is something to judgment. But in the meantime, people like you who are the people that we listen to give us a chance to make evaluations that we wouldn't be able to otherwise. Right?
Hopefully.
Yeah. So where would I start here? I mean, on your page, where would you tell me to go on this?
Well, first let me address a couple of comments you made in your the beginning of your intro. You said that I've inspired. You said you've inspired us. There are 5 of us, and so in Washington State here, it's precious few people that have one single concern about the law and government until the government sets about imposing smart meters on everybody, and then you get a wave of excitement through Seattle and some activism and protest. And with the gun registration bill of the last election cycle, there was some protest in front of the Capitol. Other than that, really, it's a ghost town in Washington as it relates to activism. And there's a lot of people you could listen to.
Yeah.
And I work for the victims of the people that are out there that you commonly find when you do a search on the internet for IRS help or whatever. If you stray out of the box away from H&R Block, J.K. Harris, Ronnie Deutsch, Tax Masters, there's a crew out there that are responsible taxpayer advocates. And I say responsible only in the sense that they play the game the way the IRS requires. And while I'm a taxpayer advocate, I do not operate in the same realm of understanding. Those folks will do exactly what IRS publications say to do and help you get back in the system. I, on the other hand, have analyzed tax law, and my analysis was complete in 1994 when I wrote my treatise called Codebreaker. And I looked at the tax code with the question of, do Americans owe a tax? The second question, do Americans owe a tax when all they've done is sell their labor for compensation as a sole proprietor, a self-employed individual, or an employee? Just those 2 questions require that you analyze the chapters that impose income taxes. And that sets me apart from everything you would call the anti-tax movement or the patriot movement, which is basically a pack of morons that cause a lot of people to needlessly go to prison. And while they have websites, curriculums, and a client base, maybe a fan club would be a better way to describe it, I can so easily shoot them down. It's disgusting. I meet the people that go to those folks after those folks have wasted all their money on meaningless materials and quote-unquote seminars, and then they contact me because they're in trouble. So I don't have anything really good to say about the anti-tax movement, and there are really only a couple people out there with their head on their shoulders regarding tax code analysis. And it's one thing to sit here and say I could shoot them down that easily. Here's your proof. Anybody that says income tax is collected through voluntary compliance, or file an income tax return this way, file this and you'll get all your taxes back. They're using the word taxes, and yet they are unaware of the existence of the statute that explains how all compensation for services is taxed, according to the IRS Chief Counsel, several circuit courts, and tax court, everybody agrees Tax Code Section 83 explains how to tax a paycheck, and none of these people have any clue as to its existence, its language, its operation, its relevance. Nobody. And that includes your accountant. It includes all the people at H&R Block. So, hearkening back to my affirmation that I operate in a different realm, there are plenty of people out there that'll try to get you back in the system to get you out of IRS trouble, whereas I've proven the IRS and the tax code are two entirely different things. On wevgov.com, on the federal income taxation page, you'll see the not the skeleton, but the meat of the argument that Americans have never been subject to the tax code, as proven through the analysis of only several key statutes. So I've narrowed it down to several key statutes when argued the way I argue them. August 2nd, 2005, the Department of Justice faced this briefing in a civil suit. A man called me in spring of '05 and says, "I fear I might be indicted for failure to file. I just heard your name. I never heard of you before. Somebody said you do good work. Any ideas?" And I said, "How would you like an exhibit that proves that you sued the United States for proof the tax code applies to Americans and they can't even debate you on 3 or 4 statutes?" He said, "Let's go for it." So I briefed the argument you see on the federal income taxation page there, and submitted it as a brief behind the complaint, saying all he wants out of this lawsuit is answers to these questions if these conclusions are invalid. And instead of disproving the conclusions as invalid conclusions, as faulty reasoning or analysis, U.S. Attorney Stephen Bass asked for a protective order against the questions. And the judge issued a protective order prohibiting the plaintiff from asking the government about those statutes. And to this day, they can't go on record with their own interpretation of those statutes. With the presumption I'm correct, and armed with that protective order as exhibit number 1, I wrote a 33-page racketeering and extortion complaint, 58-page memorandum, included several exhibits, a 12-page notarized cover letter, and served 80 members of Congress with 180 pages. Cost me almost $6,000. That was January 1st of '06. And I've never received so much as a punctuation mark in reply from Congress. And since then, that complaint and that briefing has been used by more than a dozen people to prevent their own indictment. We've seen my office since 2006 has caused the Department of Justice to shut down grand jury proceedings and the IRS's Criminal Investigations Division to close investigations, so that you know, I hear from these people on my conference calls maybe a year and a half after they file an affidavit with Congress concurring or agreeing with my criminal complaint, saying I'm a similarly situated witness to crime, and I hereby name these U.S. attorneys as similarly situated criminals. And a year and a half later, they'll pop up on one of my conference calls and say, "Yeah, I'm so-and-so. I joined your complaint a year and a half ago." And I'll ask them, "Have you heard anything since?" They say, "No, nobody's called me. The grand jury haven't subpoenaed any more of my relatives to testify against me, and no indictment." And that's more than a dozen people who have benefited from this complaint based on only several key statutes. And the tax code is more than 20 pounds of rice paper with its regulations, over 8 million words. And when you have to study a great deal of it to arrive at a couple of baseline conclusions. There are plenty of things you can study that don't lead to a controversy, and I only teach the things that prove there's a discrepancy between the IRS and what it says is its authority and the actual letter of the law. And that's what I specialize in, is after having analyzed mountains of information, statutes, case law, I've come to several key conclusions regarding these several statutes that impose the biggest damage to the IRS's arguments that it has all the authority it claims to have. And you see this on wevgov.com on the federal income taxation page. And as you look at the tax code, when you've filed your tax returns, when you have paid all that the IRS says you owe, they are not acting against you. But there's a process in place whereby what they say are income taxes are imposed. And it narrows the entire tax code down to 4 chapters. 5 chapters if you include the chapter on the W-4 form, but that doesn't impose a tax. It only imposes the W-4 form withholding method. So we're going to forget about Chapter 24 because it doesn't even impose a tax. The question is, do Americans owe a tax as those taxes are imposed by the tax code? And looking first at those 4 chapters, I've chosen to key upon the definition of citizen in those 4 chapters. Those chapters are chapters 1, 2, 21, and 24. Excuse me, chapters 1, 2, 21, and 23. Chapter 24 is the W-4 form. Chapter 23 is the Federal Unemployment Tax Act, an excise tax paid by employers, but it happens to come right out of your paycheck. Chapter 23, Section 3306J. For the purposes of this chapter, an individual who is a citizen of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, but not otherwise a citizen of the United States, well, that's the citizen they say I am, that I'm a citizen of the United States. And that definition just expressly excluded me. And understand, there's a million things to research, and it's all in one place, in one pile, and the government doesn't have to speak about it. And so just to narrow your argument down to this precise equation I'm outlining was 4 or 4.5 years of solid research of nothing but tax code and regulations. So I'm going to say that regulation, or that statute, excuse me, 3306J expressly excludes me, and so I don't owe the Federal Unemployment Tax Act sums imposed by Chapter 23. I move then to Chapter 21, FICA, Employee, the Federal Insurance Contributions Act. Section 3121E has the same definition of citizen. The Federal Unemployment Tax Act and the Old Age Survivors Disability Insurance, Social Security Retirement, were part of the 1935 Social Security Act. It wasn't until 1965 that Medicare was added to the Act. And since I have the same definition of citizen in Chapter 21, FICA for the employee, I claim that's not my citizenship. It expressly excludes me because in parentheses it says, but not otherwise a citizen of the United States. I don't make the argument that I'm not a citizen of the United States. That's what the government says I am. Fine, that's fine with me, because when I am that citizen, I got tons of protections against what they do to everybody every day. Chapter 2, Social Security Self-Employed. Section 1402B will tell you who is not a non-resident alien for the purposes of the chapter. Somebody who's not a non-resident alien is obviously a resident citizen. For the purposes of this chapter, this person is the resident citizen. A person who is not a citizen of the United States, but who is a citizen or resident of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, or the Virgin Islands. That's not me. And what I've just done is formulated an argument based on statute against 3 chapters that they use against us in daily life, out of the 4 chapters that come into play. I've just excluded 3 of them. I've narrowed the tax code down to Chapter 1 only. And you go to the statutory definition of citizen in Chapter 1, if you can find it. You go to the index, you go to the table of contents, you search through section 1 through 1399, and you will not find in chapter 1 a definition of the term citizen, as you do in the other chapters, which is a blaring inadequacy in statutory construction. Under section 1 of the tax code that imposes the taxes for married individual, finally jointly, separately, head of household, surviving spouse, single individual, trusts, and capital gains, you find no mention of the term citizen. They say an individual. Well, for all I know, that could be the individual in chapter 21. They need to be more specific. But there is no definition of citizen. And under section 1 of the tax code, they wrote a regulation that says who owes this tax? Citizens of the United States. Wherever they live? Yes, wherever they reside. Who is a citizen of the United States? That's any person born or naturalized in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction. Section 1 doesn't say anything of that. The regulation does all the work to implicate me as a citizen of the United States as a person who might owe the Chapter 1 tax, in violation of the 16th Amendment that says Congress can lay and collect the tax. It has to be a statute. This is the first argument. It's a violation of the 16th Amendment. It is a tax imposed on Americans strictly through the promulgation of regulations under Section 1. You can't impose a tax through regulation. When you read the federal income taxation page of wevgov.com, it starts at the top of the page with 3306J. I'm not Chapter 23. Chapter 21, Section 3121E. I'm not FICA. Chapter 2, 1402B. Definition of citizen. That's not me. I'm not the self-employed Social Security citizen. I'm left only with Chapter 1, and Section 1 is there in its entirety on that page, and you never see a mention of United States citizen in the statute. And so at this point, you stop, and if you agree with me, here's the conclusion I would assert, is that to this point, we still don't have a tax code that applies to Americans. And then they said, write a regulation. And that's when they wrote 1.1-1 to complete the imposition of the Chapter 1 tax on Americans, and then they steal Social Security from you by saying you're that citizen. So there's the first primary argument to answer the question, do citizens of the United States owe a tax under the tax code? Not those first three taxes, and they only owe Chapter 1 because the regulation was written, and that's unconstitutional because the 16th Amendment says Congress can lay and collect this tax. It has to be a statute. This is an argument they needed a protective order against in 2005. Checkmate.
Yeah.
The second argument on that same federal income taxation page is the answer to the question, when all I've done is sell my services for compensation, is there an income tax imposed on that? And when you look at tax code section 83, you'll see there that there's case law right there from tax court, several circuit courts from 1979 through 2011. Section 83 applies to all compensation. It explains how to tax it. It governs the taxation of property transferred in connection with the performance of services, and it provides for the determination of what is to be included in gross income. So I don't have a choice, you don't have a choice, the IRS doesn't have a choice, the DOJ, the judge, nobody has a choice. And yet the government will not go on record with its own interpretation of Section 83. Section 83 says, if in connection with the performance of services property is transferred, the excess of the value of that property over the amount paid shall be included in gross income. You have to determine what the amount paid is before you know what the excess is. And there's a lot of morons out there that will say income isn't defined in the code because some judge said that a long time ago. Section 83 is the definition of income. Income is profit, cost defines profit, and Section 83 defines cost. And it says only the excess over the amount paid is gross income. I've been up against the government with this time and time and time again in court. They can't even put their own interpretation of Section 83 on the record. That's the answer to the second question. Here's the third question. If I owed Social Security, it's an income tax. If Section 83 applies to all compensation, it applies to wages in Chapter 21 in FICA. It applies to Chapter 2, self-employment earnings. Social Security is an income tax. So even if I were subject to Social Security, Section 83 has to operate before you can say I owe those taxes. So they're stealing Social Security two ways. I'm not that citizen, and it's an income tax. You deprive me of Section 83 to impose Social Security on my wages as well. So here's, in just two arguments, I've got a blanket of conclusions that prove we've never owed a dime to the IRS under any of those four chapters, period. And in large part, I would say the umbrella that I speak under when I outline these is the umbrella of you don't understand your relationship with your government, American. You don't understand. You still use the word income tax. I filed a racketeering and extortion complaint with 80 members of Congress that has, since 2006, prevented a dozen indictments and shut down grand jury proceedings. Does that mean I'm wrong? If I were wrong, they could go on record with their own interpretation of the law. They can't. We've never owed a penny. And so in wide view, you see that your relationship with your government is the same relationship you have with the person that steals your identity and drains your bank account. Your relationship with your federal government is the same as your relationship with the person that breaks through your front door with a battering ram under a falsely obtained search warrant. Your relationship with your government is the same as the relationship you have with the person that carjacks your car at gunpoint and forces your family out of your car. That's your relationship with government. Because as you'll see on the state income taxation page of wevgov.com, many different states' income tax statutes that say what you owe the state is in relation to what you owe the Fed, or adjusted gross income for this state is what the Federal Internal Revenue Code says is your adjusted gross income, your tax liability. So it's all built on what is your federal liability, that's how much you owe the state. So state income taxes fall under the attack under Section 83 that I used federally. And when you understand that the state is stealing from you as well as the Fed in the states that impose income taxes, for instance, New York, Section 610, 611, 612. And you'll see other statutes there, Massachusetts, Indiana, South Carolina, a whole bunch of different states. California Code Section 17081 adopts by reference subchapter of the Internal Revenue Code that includes Section 83. So 83 is state law in California, and you won't find a single accountant that knows how to comply with California Code Section 17081. So the states are stealing too. And all of it is built on just the several statutes you see on the federal income taxation page at wevgov.com. Your relationship with your government is one of chattel. They own us. And in 1913, a bunch of bankers got together, purchased a bunch of congressmen, and said, let's steal from 320 million gun owners. And they did it. They got the Federal Reserve Act, the 16th Amendment for income taxes, and the 17th Amendment that says senators will no longer be elected or appointed by state legislatures. They're going to be elected by the citizens. Who are the citizens? A bunch of farmers and drill press operators. This is 1913. And look how well it's turned out for the bankers. They've got a tax code that weighs over 20 pounds. Chronologically, it goes like this. 1913, Federal Reserve Act, 16th Amendment, 17th Amendment. 1935, the Social Security Act, FDR, the second most accomplished thief in history. 1939, the first tax code, Section 3811 is the statutory foundation for Social Security. Then in 1954, they rewrote the tax code and split Section 3811 up into Chapters 2 and 21 according to Tax Code Section 7651, parentheses 4, parentheses A, which you'll see on wevgov.com, and you'll see a photograph of Section 3811 right there out of the 39 code. Then in 1965, they added Medicare as an additional tax under the Social Security Act of 1935. Section 211 of that act had the same definition of citizen as you see in 1402B, self-employment Social Security in the tax code. Title 42, where they dispense Social Security benefits, Section 411B2, the same definition of citizen as in Chapter 2 of the tax code. Now, that's 1965. Here we come forward to 2010. The health care bill. I downloaded the health care bill in PDF format, 2,500 pages. Control A turns the whole thing blue. Control C copies everything that's in blue, and then I went into a Microsoft Word document, Control V, pasted it all into a Microsoft Word document. Control H, what do you want to search for? What do you want to replace? I want to search for the word security. What do you want to replace it with? I want to replace it with the word security, but in 18-pick bold and italics. And I want to do the same thing with the word gross, the same thing with the word revenue, and the same thing with the word treasury. So that everywhere it says gross income, Internal Revenue Code, Social Security, or Secretary of the Treasury in the health care bill, it stands out like a sore thumb in big, black, bold and italics, 18-pick letters. And then I went back through the health care bill and found that half of it is an amendment to the Social Security Act, which does not apply to Americans, and 1/6 of it is an amendment to Chapter 1 of the Internal Revenue Code, which doesn't apply to Americans except through that regulation, which is unlawful. They can't do that with a regulation. And what that exposes is that the Social Security Act, which originally was unmanageable, very complex, it stands as a place where they can simply dream up a scheme of taxation and plug it into the Social Security Act to operate as an additional excise upon our society, to steal yet another percentage of our GDP. You got to get health insurance now. Who do I get that from? Health insurance companies. Who owns that? The bankers that own the government. And so it's another way for them to get a whole bunch of money right out of our pockets. Then you have Jonathan Gruber, who from MIT, a quote-unquote professor who's never heard of Section 83 of the tax code, probably because he's a moron and not really a professor. He thought up the idea of we have these Cadillac plans that some blue ribbon employers gave their employees as part of their employment, where you get a deluxe health care plan, and the government wasn't taxing those. And he said, why don't we tax those at the point of sale from the health insurance provider to the employer, tax the provider so they can't afford to offer them anymore. And the cost, of course, was handed down to the employers that were purchasing the plans, and they told their employees, we can't afford to give you benefits anymore. We're taking away your benefits, but we'll pay you a higher wage or salary. That benefits the government this way. These employees were paid more in their salary, and the government taxes salaries. And the government makes an extra $240 billion, with a B, billion dollars more per year. $240 billion more by taxing the health insurance plan at the provider level to where the employer can't afford to buy the plans and instead pays a higher salary that the government can come in and quote-unquote tax, when in fact The American citizen, the U.S. citizen, does not owe any of these taxes to begin with. What you have is not the progressive income tax. You have the progressives' racketeering scheme. From the onset, the bankers put this in place because they feel they should steal from 320 million gun owners. What do you get when you steal from a gun owner? And I'm waiting for the American to wake up to some very simple arguments. I've just covered 2 arguments that do the heaviest lifting, and I've cited how many statutes? 6 or 7? Can you learn that many? Can you look at that and tell me, oh, that's my citizenship? If it is, I can't help you. If you're so irretrievably ignorant, you can look right at the definition of citizen in those chapters and say, that's me, I owe Social Security. I can't help you. But if you do look at those definitions and say, that's definitely not me, keep reading. On wevgov.com, you'll see that there's publications for sale. Take from Caesar, volumes 1 and 2. Volume 1 is the 180-page complaint I served on Congress in 2006. Volume 2 is an appellate briefing, as if it were to be filed into, let's say, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals of these 2 arguments, with a history of where they've been, docket numbers, quotes of the way the courts have chosen to dispose of these arguments while not indulging them. You also have the supplemental briefing from August of 2014 and the supplemental briefing from just February, a couple months ago, that I filed on top of those complaints with 3 committees in Congress. And then you'll also see there's a Codebreaker, the Section 83 equation, a manual about Section 83 that I wrote in 1994. I added 30 pages to it a year ago as an epilogue to bring it up to date and published it. There's a flash drive with 3 hours, 45 minutes of instruction on it in 7 video segments where I start you at the beginning with the maxims you have to follow when you interpret statute. Regulations can't deviate from statute. Congress writes the law, has to be interpreted fairly with indifference as between the government and the taxpayer, and that you have to go honor precedent. If it's the Supreme Court that says something, you're bound by it. Very easy to understand maxims of law, canons of statutory interpretation, void for vagueness. If the average individual can't understand the law, the individual wins when a controversy arises under that law, so forth. And then I get into a couple of different aspects of the tax code in order. You watch those videos and it comes to a segment called Tax Code from the Ground Up, where I summarize everything I just taught you about statute, and then I build on top of that the understanding of the regulations they wrote to change the tax code, the statutes they ignore to pound on their chest the way they do when they in fact from the beginning have had no authority whatsoever, and to show you that the tax code's perfect and the IRS is operating in outright defiance of the letter of the law in the tax code. And with this understanding comes the understanding that your relationship with government is this. You are the personal possession of a hate group. The government is a hate group, a racketeering and extortion scheme that operates to protect its felons en masse from the letter of the law at any cost, no matter what they have to look like in the process. And now you have Hillary Clinton. I'll tell you what, there is a firestorm brewing over her head that is going to come crashing down, and if it doesn't drive her out of candidacy, for the life of me, and I've been saying this for years, I don't know what's wrong with America, but another exclamation point's about to be put on all that with the scandal that's brewing regarding the Clinton Foundation and all these donations they've accepted from Russian companies that are buying interest in uranium mines in Utah. Contributions to the fund corresponding with dealings in the State Department at the same time, where Hillary is determining oil deals or whatever, and there's companies in Colombia that stand to gain. At the same time, they're paying Bill Clinton $500,000 as a guest speaker. There's a firestorm brewing over these contributions to the Clinton Fund right now, and it makes me happy to see them so early on the trail of these contributions. We still got 16 months, I think, till the election, maybe 15. And people are already on this like a stink. There's a book out about it, and it's just one little facet of the corruption of the federal government. But these revenue streams that I've proven have always been illegal. They've operated to do what for Americans? Seniors, Social Security, great. Some of it's been spent on roads, maybe, but the rest of it's spent on aircraft carriers and campaigns in the banker's image, but in my name, to set camels on fire and kill a generation of Iraqis with depleted uranium ammunition that's all over their landscape, so their children are born with deformities that will simply revile you and haunt your dreams. And the rest of the world has put a target on my back to where the kids go to school and you have to wonder, are they going to survive school today? Because if it's not a school cop that shoots them, it could be a bomber that says the best way to go out in a blaze of glory in the name of ISIS is to wear a backpack into a crowd of school children waiting for the bus and detonate it as a suicide bomber. And all of this comes from the gross mismanagement of our society and our economy by a group of bankers that think gun owners should be fleeced to the point where their kids are malnourished. So bottom line on everything I've done, and this is just income taxation, you look at the chain of abuse, how long it's been, the chronology of it, the way they've accomplished it, and I would hope it's enough to get you to pick up at least a picket sign or the phone, or get on your computer and write a letter to your congressman and complain. It's all right there on the website. In sum, on the left-hand side of the website in the menu column at the top, you'll see YouTube and YouTube 2. Click on YouTube 2. There are free seminars you can take there where I'll narrate an expose on certain documents and the arguments I've just gone over, and the motor vehicle code, citizen's arrest, the right to arrest a felon. What wouldn't you give to be able to prove to any IRS agent that approaches you that they're a felon just for opening their mouth to you? Because it gives you the dominion of citizen's arrest over them. So I've put as much on the web for free as I can afford to, but in summary, it's all right there in its nucleus. If you want to know more, if you want to read about it, if you want something for your bookshelf for reference matter in the future, buy the materials, get the videos. You'll never see anybody do to the tax code what I do on that flash drive that has the video segments. And if this doesn't cause you to acquire a brand new understanding of your relationship with government, I don't know what will.
Considering that this is all kind of new to a lot of people, and they can go to the website, they can actually pay PayPal, iBill, whatever, you know.
Yeah, just click on the order link.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way,
all right,
click on the order link,
got it.
And a shopping cart page will pop up, and type in Will. That's our host.
Okay.
W-I-L-L, and you'll receive 10% off the price of materials, and another 10% will go to support the host.
Wow.
So you get 10% off the item, and you'll contribute to Will's effort here with his wonderful television show.
Wow.
To hopefully support the effort to get the word out. You have to wake up when there's so much proof right in one place, and it's not it's not a matter of a political controversy. This is about the law. You're being stolen from by Democrats and Republicans. Everybody in the federal government steals from you this way, and when I can prove that to you and show you that it's actually prevented indictments, I can't tell you what kind of a feeling of satisfaction it gives you to hear from somebody saying the grand jury's been shut down, the government went home, and this person stood to go to prison on false charges.
Yeah.
When I can help somebody out of that mess, it's the reason I'm in this.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Is to help my fellow man, my fellow American, avoid the pitfalls of a government that's always been out of control.
Dave, do
Yeah.
you have some information on the motor vehicle codes and
It's on the
whatnot?
site. There's a motor vehicle page there also.
Well, you might want to mention that there are some CDs and whatnot available for those because they're fantastic.
You'll see them right there on the website, motor vehicle code page. I'm here to talk mostly about the income tax today.
Understood, yeah.
But there's also a video on the YouTube channel about public vehicular travel, which the legislatures across the United States on a state level say is a right. Highways are open as a matter of right to public vehicular travel. If you go to the motor vehicle code page, you'll see Google, Alta Vista, and Yahoo. Click on Google. It's a search, automatic search on Google for the phrase open as a matter of right to public vehicular travel. You'll get 2.3 million hits.
Well,
The roads are open as a matter of right everywhere. It's not a privilege. They're stealing under the motor vehicle code as well.
That's amazing work, Mr. Merlin.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a different form of being the Old West, but it's still the Old West kind of thing. And
The Old West wasn't about high technology, and these people have made technology of law. The law has been so overdone. The complexities are enormous, and it's so they have places to hide from everybody except those who are willing to do the amount of work I've done.
Well, I don't know where I read it, but I remember I read that if you don't know what your rights are, you don't have any.
That's right. If you don't know where you stand, you don't know anything.
Well, that's, I mean, I'm thrilled. I mean, that was like 2008 on the Seattle Municipal Court case 516517, but it rips the whole court system up, and they know it.
Well, it's all built on crime.
Yes.
And the theories of the anti-tax movement about I must have assessed myself, I must have used the zip code, I must have done a whole bunch of really weird stuff they've come up with. All those are conclusions based on a presumption that enforcement is legitimate. And when you understand the law first, you understand enforcement is illegitimate, and therefore their quest for revenue is a racketeering scheme.
Well, Dr. David R. Hawkins, who I really appreciate his work also, he said that Jesus Christ, Buddha, and Krishna all said the same thing. The only real sin there is ignorance. And that sure feels right to me at this time.
It's a country full of it, and I can't seem, you know, I've been on easily 6 radio shows, 2-hour appearances in the last 2 months, and sold 3 books.
Well, people are waking up slowly, Dave. You know, it takes time.
It's their problem. I'm already awake.
Exactly.
I can appear like this, and what Americans do with and to their country is their business. It's out of my hands.
Yes.
I've done as much as I can.
Yes.
And I do what I can to keep the government from speaking to me. And if you want a permanent relationship with the IRS, ignore me.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I'm excited about the whole truth matter here. Very excited. And I think that people will, as we wake up, they will turn to people that have the truth about what you're speaking of.
I'm in competition with the anti-tax movement. They're all willing to yell louder than I do. They're all willing to spend thousands of dollars on their website, and they refuse to learn anything, and yet they're out there pounding their chest telling everybody they can help them, and when those people are facing an indictment, they find me.
Yes.
Because they followed these other morons
Yes.
right up to the gates of hell, and then the gates open, and then they go, obviously I've been doing the wrong thing, and then they find me. So
Well, there's one fellow that I knew way back when who was with the Patriot Act, and he refused to pay taxes, and he went to federal prison. And another guy who ran the Patriot Act, same thing on that.
there's a million stories out there. What I was getting to, though, is that I can't be heard among a sea of shysters that are screaming at everybody that they have the answers. So what Americans do is their business. I'm not going to stand around and compete with all these others. All I can do is all I can do. It's all on the web. When you see that I've got the truth, If you understand it to be the truth, of course, I'm not here to babysit you or beat you up or sell you something. You look at the truth. If you can't recognize it at the truth, go back to your Oprah show. I have nothing for you.
Well, you do. Actually, you do. And I know it, and a lot of other people know it too.
When you met me, it was probably more than 13 years ago, maybe 14.
1998,
and,
I think.
You said you had a certain problem, and I said I didn't know if I could help you. I wrote you one document, didn't even ask the court to vacate the case in that document, and the court vacated the case rather than even look at the document.
Oh, yes, I remember.
And said, you know,
Yeah.
no more conviction on this misdemeanor. You're free to go. And
Exactly.
didn't even want to look at